A couple of weeks back, you and I drove this, the first ever fully electric Rolls Royce known as the Spectre. We talked about it, why it's special, not just because of the propulsion system, but the changes that came about to develop this car and why it's not a fully electric Wraith, hence the different name. So today you and I are going to dive a bit more into the technical details of why this stands out from other Rolls Royce coupes that have came before it. So we have to get something out of the way right at the top. This episode is not about the electric propulsion system that underpins this, the first fully electric Rolls Royce. For that, we covered it in gory detail in the first drive review of this car. You can check out that episode here. Today, we're going to discuss the differences between this and other Rolls Royce coupes that came before, because most people look at this, like me, and they said, that's just a Wraith EV, why not call it a Wraith? And there you would be wrong. And the first stop would be speaking to the engineers at Rolls-Royce. They would tell you it's a totally different size car. It's actually closer to the Phantom Coupe, or Coupe, however you want to say that, rather than this. And I can kind of prove it to you. The size difference, like the wheelbase, where you package a lot of people, a lot of dogs. I'm guessing you wouldn't put a dog in a car like this. Kumo, he never was a big Rolls-Royce fan. He was more of an Aston Martin Lotus guy. Anyway, that is 4 inches longer here than this. Phantom Coupe, that's 4 inches longer than this in wheelbase, so 8 inches more than this. In terms of the length of the vehicle, this is 5 inches longer than this. In terms of this to the Phantom Coupe, that's another 5 inches longer, so a total of 10 inches longer. So the idea is this is kind of like a tweener in terms of size. And I get the whole logic of that. They could have went with, hey, we're going to make a Phantom electric, but here's the problem. That car weighs 6,371 pounds. Let me put that in different math. Almost 2,900 kilograms. So the reality is, even with almost 600 horsepower, it's 584 horsepower, total system horsepower between 2 electric motors, front and rear, and then over 660 pounds of torque, it's a quick car. If you add in that extra length, I'm guessing you're adding somewhere between 500 to 800 more pounds, which would slow the car down. And to give you an idea of comparison, this at 6,371 is almost 900 pounds heavier than the bigger Phantom Coupe. Now here's where we get to a bit of a design trick. Whether it's a Rolls-Royce, a Rover, an RS6, what designers like to do is to put horizontal lines in their cars to make them look wider, give them the appearance of width, even though they don't have the width. You don't really have this problem here because this is a very large car, a very wide car, but they wanted to accentuate the difference here, at least that's what I'm thinking from a design perspective. So rather than saying, let's get rid of the grille, because frankly you don't need the grille in a car like this, let's make it a design icon, but make it very big so it's more noticeable, but not ridiculous. I know you guys like to complain about the grille on the BMW M3 and the M4. I think it's attractive and makes the car stand out from other cars in like a sea of regular sedans. Same kind of thing here. Notice it's not as tall, but it's much wider, and it's the widest fitted to any Rolls Royce that has come before it. Another thing that's changed, so this is bigger, let's talk about smaller here. The coefficient of drag here was a big deal because that impacts the efficiency. We learned 266 miles of US EPA rated range. Not the car you're going to go across country with, or at least you can do it with a lot of stops, but they still had to fine-tune the design to make it more efficient going through the air. And one of the things they had to deal with was the hood ornament. You're not going to take a hood ornament off of a Rolls Royce. I'm still one of those people that's angry that they took the hood ornament off of an AMG, because you buy a car like an S63, I want to see the stand-up hood ornament. Same kind of deal here, but this, it's changed or shaped to be more aerodynamic, and that's where they get the 0.25 coefficient of drag. To give you an idea, cars normally about 0.28 to 0.32. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the Hyundai Ioniq 6, that's unusually low for a production car, 0.22 coefficient of drag. But let's put aside those numbers and just look at it. Yeah, They changed some of the creases on the hood, obviously. The light signature is different. It comes at you, it looks like a show car, but something that meets a production car. I'll put it out there, I am not a Rolls Royce guy. You guys know my favorite Rolls Royce is the Rolls Royce Dawn, because that car, you wear, it's sinister. Like the doors come up to here, you feel like you're sitting in the car, not on the car. Same deal here. Me personally, I find this incredibly attractive, and the presence works even with the ridiculously large wheels. 23-inch wheels, largest fitted to a production Rolls-Royce ever. Now, while we're talking about production cars, some of you may remember that there were 2 Rolls-Royce electric cars that came before this. Those were not production cars, those were experimental cars. So basically test beds, pre-production cars. Rolls-Royce calls them experimental and puts an EX in the name. So there was the 102 EX back in 2011 and the 103 EX in 2016. We actually did an episode on that car, and I interviewed the then CEO of the company. The car really wasn't something that was ever going to come to life. It was like a Rolls-Royce 100 years in the future, basically autonomous driving. However, the 102 EX, that car was a real driver. It actually looked like a production car, kind of not far off of this. This one's a little bit more stylish. Speaking of style, this is like a form follows function kind of thing here. We talked about some of the things being smaller, like the Spirit of Ecstasy, the grille being larger. Well, this one panel here, this quarter back here, it's the largest single panel ever fitted to a Rolls-Royce production car. So think about that. This is a hand-built car. They make these things in a factory in the southeast of England, and you've got guys that are basically hammering out panels, or you have machines that kind of form some of the other panels. This is one large panel, even bigger than the one that sits in the rear of this car. So let's clarify this point. Rolls-Royce has taken an iconic shape, which was the Wraith. People look at it whether you love it or hate it. It's something that stands out, and they've rendered it in a different way, but in a more seamless way, literally by not having a seam in the entire rear quarter of the car. Now, you guys know me, I gotta get pedantic at some point, and this being a Rolls-Royce, it's about umbrellas. This is the umbrella from the dark blue car, and this is the umbrella from the Spectre. Now you look at this and you say, yeah, it's lovely that they have an umbrella in a car with 2 doors in a place like California. Think about where the car is made, it rains more there. This one, you can see it has never been open. So the owner of this car, which is a friend of mine, he's probably gonna get pissed at me because I'm the first one that opened the umbrella, he didn't. And then this one, we learned in the full first drive review in a round of the options game, you get the umbrella, but you have to pay an additional $1,775 to have this more finished. You can see this one is more dressed up. Now the umbrellas bring us to one of the last 2 items we have to discuss, and that would be the doors. Again, falls under the heading of the largest ever fitted to a Rolls-Royce, in length at least. They're over 5 feet, I believe. Yes, they are power operated like that car. It's a little bit more confusing because that car has the button that's kind of at the base of the A-pillar. It's kind of perfect. This one, you hit the brake, the door closes, or there's a button in the center console. I would argue it's more about the way the Wraith worked. Maybe we change that. And then one thing about the electric propulsion system, and that would be the battery. So we learned in BMW electrified cars that they actually are trying to solve the problem that the government mandates are trying to solve, at least one small sliver of it. One of the issues with batteries, we've argued this in many other members-only episodes, is where do you get the minerals from? Where do you get the bits that make up the battery? And right now you need those. The battery technology hasn't changed, and it comes from places where rogue nations control the mineral rights. In the case of BMW, they actually look to source the minerals from countries that, at least the mineral rights of those countries, are not controlled by the likes of like China. So they're looking at like Argentina, Australia. They got 2 more that they're sourcing from the Spectre. And that, I kind of give them a lot of kudos for that, because very few car companies are doing that. And you could imagine it lowers the supply they have. Granted, a car like this, they're not making a lot of them, so they can do it, and it, I'd say, really does go to the thrust of why electric cars, at least what government mandates are pushing on us. I don't want to get into this argument here. We'll get into this argument in other episodes, but wanted to point this out because they go a long way, a little bit further than we learned with the BMW i4, because the list of countries that are contributing the minerals that don't have conflict rights is a bit longer now, so they're making some headway. So this may be a fancy car, but we still have to geek out about something technology-wise. Rolls Royce, they have this thing called architecture of luxury. We saw that first on the new Ghost, and that's expanded into other vehicles like the Cullinan. And that they've done here, and you think, well, how could they use the same platform? It's not internal combustion. Now they're claiming that the platform was designed to be EV from the get-go. And what they've done is they've taken the 4 hard points, meaning the wheels. Those are the hard points of the platform. And they use very fancy castings of aluminum to create the structure at the 4 corners of the vehicle. But here what they've done, the battery is part of the structure. Now that's nothing new. Other car manufacturers have done that. Here they've taken the opportunity to use the battery as an additional source of sound deadening. Where the rubber meets the road, you do notice that this is a quieter cabin than other internal combustion engine Rolls Royces. And it's not just the fact that it doesn't have an engine, because the entire time I've been talking to you about this, I've had the Rolls Royce sound on. Now yes, there's a ton more to cover, but these are the highlights I wanted to hit post the first drive review. And you can see these are very technical, in the weeds kind of stuff that I thought would be too much for the first drive review. Wish list, not really much here to cover because I kind of gave you a big one in the first drive review. That said, I'm going to add something very pedantic because this is a pedantic episode. So yes, this one is fitted with a Starlight headliner. We talked about in the first drive review, you can have the Starlight doors, and they have the dashboard with the Starlight stuff. But how about a combination of a Starlight headliner and a sunroof? So maybe like a metal sunroof that has the Starlight in it, but at least I can open the car and have some airiness in the car, or maybe Starlight in the glass like they do in some of the BMWs. But I'm just one man, and this is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all word, MotoManTV, all word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you found this episode fascinating, I would highly suggest you watch our episode where we compared in this same spot 2 Porsches, the 911 ST, wonderful car, and my car, my personal 911 GT3 Touring. It's a 992. Matter of fact, very similar in color. We talk about the very minute, like complete technical, nerdy details between those 2 cars, again, that didn't make it to the full first drive review. You can check out that episode here. Until I see you in the next episode, be später.